Hey, it's Jenna Harte, and today is Writer Wednesday, which I only just recently learned about when I was watching some YouTube videos. So I thought it would be fun to do a Writer Wednesday for fans or writers who are interested in the writing process. Now, there's a lot of things that differ and are unique among writers in terms of how they do things. And other times, if you watch your videos, you'll see a lot of them are using sort of the same sort of terminology. A lot of it is just sort of the process and the routine that they use or the systems they use to get their writing done. So I thought it might be fun to share mine. Now, October 1st is coming up in just a couple of days, and after October comes November. And November is National Novel Writing Month, also known as NaNoWriMo. I've been doing NaNoWriMo for most years over the last 10 years or so. I think there might have been a couple of years there that I didn't actually do it, but I'm a pretty steady NaNoWriMer doer, and I don't always succeed. The last couple of years I have. I pretty much hit that 50,000 words in 30 days, but in the beginning years, it was sort of hit and miss. Whether I was successful or not. But even when I wasn't successful, I still had more words written by the end of November than I would have if I hadn't tried. So I'm always encouraging people to try it out, even if you think it's really daunting and a crazy lunatic thing to do, which it sort of is. But you could argue that writers with all these crazy stories in their head are sort of crazy lunatic. So I encourage you to try it out. One of the things about NaNoWriMo, though, that it really helps to be prepared as you go into it. So a lot of people use the month of October to do that. In fact, there's some really interesting names out there. My favorite has been PrepNoWriMo, which is basically October, and you're preparing for NaNoWriMo. Now, I usually have a little bit ready going in, but I find that about midway or three-quarters of the way into the month of November, things start to get really hard for me in terms of achieving my word count. And it's one of the things that I want to try and avoid this year. I want to get a rough draft done of the second book of my Cozy Mystery series, and I don't want it to be too hard to do it. A couple times when I finished NaNoWriMo, it was really on a wing and a prayer that I was able to squeak those words in on November 30th. And I really don't want that. I don't want it to be too stressful. The reality is 1,667 words a day for 30 days really isn't that hard. It doesn't take that much time. What it does take is knowing what you're going to write. So I want to use the month of October to figure out, okay, what is it I'm going to write? It's a good time here to sort of talk a little bit about the pantser versus the plotter, because that does play into how difficult NaNoWriMo could be. And a pantser is someone who really just writes by the seat of their pants. They have this kernel of an idea, but they really don't know what's going to happen or where it's going to go. It can be a great and fantastic adventure. But the problem is it can fall apart. You can get stuck because you don't really know where to go. Plotters, on the other hand, they plot, they outline. Some of them have very, very detailed outlines. Some of them only have maybe a list of scenes. Some of them may not even have that much, but they've plotted it out. Now, there are pros and cons to each. In the pantser, of course, if you get stuck, that can be hard. Some people feel the outlining method stifles creativity and makes the project not so much fun because you're just sort of going through and dictating from your notes. I have found most writers I've met aren't fully one or the other. There's sort of a continuum between plotting and being a pantser, although some people lean more towards the other side. I definitely lead toward the pantser side. Matter of fact, my first books definitely pantser all the way. I had no idea what was going on. And I think it's really fun. I told somebody the other day, being a pantser, in my case, is sort of like wanting to go for a walk, but not knowing where to go until I actually start walking. And I really feel that so much of what happens in my stories only comes to me when I'm actually writing them. And if that's the case, it makes it really hard to plot. I want to plot. I really want to be able to know what I'm going to say and where I'm going. But when I would sit down to do it, I would just sort of sit there and nothing would happen. I couldn't kind of force the story to reveal itself. But when I'm writing, that's when I get all the interesting things about the characters. I have these aha moments about this is what should happen in the story. So for October, I've really got to figure out a way to get the ideas down into sort of a plot or an outline. It won't be detailed enough so that I don't get stuck in the month of November. So that is my goal, is to get enough outlined and plotted that I don't actually get stuck in November. I can just write through and get it done, easy peasy, no worries. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be using a couple tools. One thing I am going to use is Scrivener. Now, I've had Scrivener for a long time, but the way I write out of order. I don't write in chapters, and I was just having a really hard time making it work the way I write, because a lot of that stuff I add at the end. I add my chapters at the end. Sometimes when I'm writing, the first 3 chapters come very easily. Sometimes I get a little bit stuck, but I'll know maybe the black moment, and I'll know the end, so I'll write those. And then in the middle, I get kind of stuck, and I don't know how to organize them in Scrivener, but I've decided I'm going to try and figure out how to make it work for me. So that's one of the tools I plan to use. Now, if I find I'm getting stuck and it's hard, I will definitely switch back over to Word, because that's where most of my stuff has been written. The other thing I'm going to be using is the Leuchtturm 1917 bullet journal. I'm new to bullet journaling, but it looks like fun. I am not particularly artistic visually or drawing. I really can't do it, but boy, I wish I could, and I'm always willing to try. I like journals. I like to, draw and color and things like that, even though I'm not very good at it. So I thought I would try this bullet journal thing. I bought one that was just sort of my everyday work and regular life, and then I have one that's just for my writing. Now I have 2, and they actually look very similar. They're both green. Okay, but this one's slightly different. You probably can't see it, but it has the Leuchtturm on the cover here. And this particular one, it actually has 3 little doodads, so you can mark 3 little pages. And it also has a bullet journal instructions. It has a sample key, and it has all sorts of instructions in it, how it works. I got this one for about $25 at Barnes & Noble. You can get it through the Barnes & Noble website for about $19. This one I ordered from Amazon, and it was $19. It's slightly different. It only has 2 little doodads, and it really doesn't have the instructions, but it has everything else. It has the dotted pages. In the back, it actually has a little pocket where you can put stuff in, and because I'm not very artistic, I got all these little stencil things. So if I want to, have something stenciled, I can do that, which is really helpful because I cannot write in a straight line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and when I switch the camera, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the inside of the book and how I'm using it to plot for NaNoWriMo. Well, we're going to have to do something different because my iPhone cannot hold enough video for me to use it to just show you what is in my bullet journal and my NaNoWriMo plans. So I'm just going to have to hold it up to you and show it, and hopefully you'll be able to get a really good sense about what I'm doing. Now, again, if you're not a bullet journal person, some of the things I'm doing to plan for NaNoWriMo still might be interesting or helpful to you. And if you are a bullet journal person, hopefully there's some pages in there that might be interesting. You might want to add them to your own writer journal. So let's go ahead and get started. So when you open the bullet journal, it always opens on to your index. And basically how it works is the bullet journals, at least from Leuchtturm, which I think is how you pronounce it, they come numbered. and you just, put the page number and what is on the page. So that you can keep things organized. This is my writer's journal, so there's a lot of other things besides NaNoWriMo in here, but since we're just talking about NaNoWriMo Prep, I'm going to go to that page right here. And I just took the banner that's provided over at NaNoWriMo.org and printed it out and put it in my book. And then I've divided my NaNoWriMo Prep into a checklist that has 3 parts. And the part that's going to be the most important for me is this first one here, because this is about prepping the book. It's about plotting and all that kind of stuff. Now, because I'm writing the second book in a series, there's a lot of stuff I do know. I do know the characters, I know the setting, I know a little bit about what's going to happen in this book. So it's this last thing that has to do with scenes that I'm really going to want to work on. I want to make a list of many scenes as I can in October to get done. Because a lot of times when I start writing a story, I might just know the opening. I actually have a couple stories where I've written the first few chapters and that's it. I have no idea where it's going. Sometimes I know a little bit more. I know scattered scenes throughout. Sometimes I know the black moment and the ending. Whatever I know, obviously I write that down. But my goal is to not just know 1 or 2 things, but to get as much pre-planned and plotted. And it will be a list. I'm sure there'll still be holes. But as much as I can for NaNoWriMo. The second part is just about making sure I have all the tools and a place to work. Mostly I work where I work in my home office, but I'm thinking maybe for NaNoWriMo I might set up another place in the house that's just a little bit different so it doesn't feel like work. And of course I get lots of coffee. And then over here is just making sure that I add the project to my NaNoWriMo account. I check out the forums. I like to read some of the new tips and things that they might have, and connecting with social media. The NaNoWriMo Divas, I like to go there. It's pretty inactive during the year, but in October, it starts to pick up in November. It's a daily thing. You get your word count reminders. Sometimes people share what they wrote that day. They share the number of words they wrote that day. And it's a really great way to have camaraderie and commiserate and have other people so you don't feel like you're doing this crazy stunt all by yourself. So the next pages in my bullet journal are really the nitty-gritty. They are going to satisfy that first part, which has to do with plotting and getting as much information about my story determined in advance, so when I sit down to write it will be really easy. So the next page, I do have information about the story I'm writing, and the only reason I know it now is because I actually had to think about it when I submitted the book proposal for the first cozy, and we included information about 2 more books that would go with it. So I at least have a title and I have a little blurb here, and then I have my character list. These are pretty much all the characters that were in the first book, plus I've added a couple new ones that I know for sure will be in the second book. I have their age and I have their story function, so I know how they all sort of interrelate and interact in town and their purpose. I know it looks like a lot of people. There's only a handful that show up a lot, but cozies are about small towns, and small towns, why they may not have as many people as a big city, they still have a lot of people. So some of these people may not make an appearance from the first book, or if they do, it just might be for a little bit. The next thing that I do is my murder wheel. Now, when I first started writing, I was a total pantser, and half the time I didn't know who did it. I've started writing books where I didn't even know how the victim died. And that works, obviously, because I have another series of mysteries that somehow worked out. But a lot of times I was going back and adding new suspects and changing clues, and it was just a lot of work. And I thought, you know what? If I could anticipate some of this stuff in advance, it would be a little bit easier. Now, I originally started by using the Happy Planner, and one of the things I started doing was using what I call a murder grid or murder board. And I adapted that from Hallie Ephron. She has a book on mystery writing that's really helpful. And for me, the part where she talked about sort of charting out the clues and the alibis and the motives and stuff was really helpful. So that's basically what I did. Across the top is the suspect, the motive, the opportunity, the clues, and all that kind of stuff. And then down along the side, I would have my suspects, and I would fill in as much as I could in advance. And sometimes I'd have to fill in as I went. Now, not everybody has everything in there. But it was really helpful to kind of keep organized and have a sense of what I was doing. But it still wasn't ideal. And finally, I decided to move towards what I call the murder wheel, which looks like this, where I have the victim in the middle and then all the suspects around. And I don't know, visually, it was just really a lot easier for me to work with. I think because I can see how they all interconnect with the victim and to a certain extent with each other. So I have gone to this. Now I've created my murder wheel for this next book. I only have 4 suspects at this point. I may add more, I may lose one, I don't know. And the victim will go in the middle, the suspects will go around here, and then over on this side here, I basically just have the key. So I have my victim and the suspects. The red will be the motive. So around each circle, I would write their motive. The blue, I will write, the opportunity, if they had the opportunity to do this murder. In the green, I'll have any sort of clues that would make my sleuth think that this guy was the murderer. And then I will also list anything that might exonerate the person. And a lot of times this comes up later. Suspects lie. And sometimes they will lie to protect what they were doing at a certain time, even more than they want to get off on being a murder suspect. And that's sort of what makes Cozy's work, is that there's lies and untruths and deceit and all sorts of things hidden. So I sometimes will put things, for example, your suspect may be where they're not supposed to be, and they don't want anybody to know that. So that might be something I put there. And then the black lines here, these are going to show how the suspect and the victim are connected. So is it a neighbor? Is it a spouse? It's a friend, a coworker, that type of thing. So I will be filling that in October. The next section of my bullet journal is really where the rubber meets the road, and that is where I get down as many scenes, or at least have a sense of what is going to go on in each section of my book. So I have put here a 3-arc grid, and basically, I have Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and in there I have a list of some of the things that need to happen. In Act 1, I could actually write today. I know the opening, I know the inciting event, I know what's going to get the sleuth wanting to participate in trying to figure out who killed this person. For me, usually where I struggle the most in my stories is here in the middle. Now, I can send my sleuth out to talk to people and do all of that. And hopefully, if I have my clues and all that kind of thing plotted in advance, I'll be able to weave those in. But generally, when I get stuck, it's usually around the middle. So I have a list of things here, that I would like to try and fill in. Really, I'm anticipating that I'll have lots of little plot points along the way, and there'll be gaps in the middle, but I'm hoping that if I can, have, point A and point H and point M, that as I'm writing, the points in between, I'll be able to fill them in. And the more points of that I can anticipate in advance, the easier it will be. So instead of having point A and point S and point Z, which a lot of times is all I have, I'm going to try and fill in a lot of those other little points along the way. And this is what I'm going to use to help me. Now, this is also adapted. I found a mystery writing outline online, and unfortunately, I can't remember where it's from, but I'm going to find it, and I'm going to put a link to it down in the discussion. And I will also, or in the description, I'm sorry, and I'll also put a link into the 3-act structure that I used, and I sort of adapted and integrated them together to make this, and you can check it out and use it yourself. The other thing I have here is my timeline. Generally, I don't do the timeline till I'm done. I go back, and as I'm reading, I'll write down what day it is or how many days passed to make sure that I haven't skipped a day without indicating that a day was skipped, or I haven't gone from Tuesday back to Sunday. I'm not going to do it in advance either, although hopefully I'll have a sense of, how long it will take to solve this murder. I'll have a timeline sense, but I'm going to try and keep track of it as I'm writing, so it will be easier than having to go back and make it. It is important to do a timeline. I do know that it is important to keep track of names. You'd be surprised how easy it is to mix those things up and get them out of sorts, and you won't recognize it, but a reader will. And the next page, I actually have a element of scene checklist. And again, I copied this from the internet, and I will include a link to it. What I really liked about it is it has, making sure that you have at least one element from here, 2 elements from here, and these are bonuses. So each scene should have something like a plot point, or maybe it should have the character's goal. So every scene needs to have a purpose. And this can help make sure that you have achieved what the scene is supposed to do. Now, books have more scenes than what's listed here. And to be honest, I do not anticipate that I'm going to fill in every scene. Maybe I'll just be able to fill in the scenes that I can figure out before October. And make sure that has all these things. But I like this because it's a reminder of what should be in there, because sometimes you write a really great scene and it's not needed. And the problem of including a scene that's not needed is it slows your story down and it has to be taken out. We call those darlings, and I have tons of darling files on my computer, great scenes that I really loved, but because they didn't really fulfill any of these, I had to take it out. Well, we're down to the last 2 pages that I have added to my NaNoWriMo prep section of my bullet journal. It's possible I'll add more, but it's fun to add pages like that, but if you're not going to use them, it's sort of a waste. So I have tried to just have pages that are really going to help me. So one of them are story notes. Now, as I'm writing in Scrivener or even in Word, I can put notes in. In Scrivener, you can put notes in. In Word, I use the comments. So if there's something I want to remember or I want to go back and check, then I can actually put a note right within the document to do that, or somewhere else in the document to make sure that I do something. For example, I might think of something that's going to happen in advance, chapters ahead. I can put a note about that. Or maybe I want to go back and change something from a previous chapter. Both those systems allow for me to have notes, but I am not always on my computer. And while I can use something like Evernote, I find that some things I still like to write down. So I figured I would just write them down here, and then they would be there when I'm not on my computer to go back and add them, take a look at them, do the research, whatever it is the note is about. And the final page is my NaNoWriMo tracker. And it's a bookcase, and I think it came out pretty good considering I'm not very artistic. I basically adapted this, and I think it's from BoHo Berry. She might have been the first, but there's a lot of NaNoWriMo people that have this type of bookcase idea. Some of them have 50 books, which is, one for each 1,000 words. I have 30 books, one for each day in November that NaNoWriMo takes place. And my goal is to be able to fill in at least 1 book a day. And if I can do that, fill in all 30 books, then I will have achieved the 50,000 word count and achieve NaNoWriMo once again. If this pre-planning really works and I am successful, perhaps I'll be filling in more than one book during NaNoWriMo, which would be pretty cool. I would love to finish a NaNoWriMo before November, before Thanksgiving, because, you know, Thanksgiving is kind of busy. There's a lot of cooking, there's a lot of family. And so if I could finish before then and just be able to relax and not even think about adding more words to my NaNoWriMo, that would be awesome. Okay, so that's it for my pre-planning for NaNoWriMo, or my PrepNoWriMo, which I think is an awesome word. If you have things that you are doing, whether you're using a bullet journal or something else to plan for NaNoWriMo, I would love to hear it. Always looking for great ideas to make the writing process go faster and easier. And until next time, this is Jenna Harte wishing you peace, love, and happily ever after.